Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the live seminar. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to try and be brief. I'm going to be pulling together a lot of different concepts tonight. If you are looking to get something prescriptive and instructional from this, I recommend you take notes or come back and watch this again. There's a lot to cover. We're going to be looking at narcissistic abuse as it takes place at a microcosmic level amongst individuals, and narcissistic abuse as it can take place from the state down to a collective, to a nation. We're going to look specifically at the effects, the psychological effects, the philosophical effects of this particular type of abuse. And we're going to look at how those effects have created the situation that we're in now. And then we're going to start looking at what to do about it at an individual level, and then finally we'll be getting into it at a collective level. Then we're going to take questions. If you have questions, you can email them to coach@spartanlifecoach.com. Please make them one sentence long and end in a question mark, and have some compassion for Pierre, who's going to be reading through them. They will be selected, and for your fellow watchers. Try and ask a question that you think that would be for the maximum benefit of everybody who's watching. Okay, we've got a lot to get through, so let's dive straight in. Thomas, if you could pull up the first slide, please. Okay, when we're looking at narcissistic abuse of an individual, there are certain things that take place that we would be looking for in order to call it emotional abuse, psychological abuse, or narcissistic abuse. Just because it's called narcissistic abuse doesn't mean the only personality disorder that engages in these particular kinds of games are narcissists. Many people with psychological issues use this, and the effect largely is to make the target feel like they're losing their mind. The first one is gaslighting. Also can be called reality distortion, or the perpetual shifting of goalposts. Gaslighting is a term that comes from, there was actually 2 films made called Gaslight. I think it was in the early 50s. There was a man in the film who plays a classic narcissistically abusive psychopath. And in order to drive his wife crazy, he changes the lighting in the home and claims he hasn't changed it. And every time she questions what's going on, he blame shifts and makes her feel like she's losing her mind. The next thing that you will see happening is forced conversation and total domination of the narrative. So we would say that you're likely to be the victim of narcissistic abuse if you're being forced into conversations that you don't want to have, and if those conversations, if the coordinates of that conversation can't even be challenged. So you're being bullied, you're being pushed into talking about a subject that you didn't even want to talk about. And when you try and challenge the very coordinates, the linguistic coordinates of that conversation, you'll be shut down. You're just not allowed to ask those questions. So it's a kind of total domination of the narrative. This is an indicator of narcissistic abuse as well. There's something called future faking that we talk about when we're talking to victims of narcissistic abuse. That is where a future, a promised land, a utopia, will be reached one day, babe, if you just give me another chance, if you just give me another month, if you move house, if you acquire that money I need, if you hand me the keys to the kingdom, then everything's going to be okay. And it's put off in the future. It's a kind of weaponized utopianism or weaponized hope. You know, you're sort of in a position where you're made to feel like as long as you do as you're told, as long as you play the game the way you're supposed to play it, everything will be okay. So there's a false future that you're working towards, but of course it's gaslighting too. So as you move towards that false future, the dates that you were given of when, you know, money was supposed to exchange hands and then certain things would occur, oh, there's another reason, and there's another reason, and there's another reason, and so it's a future fake. You never get to utopia. You never get to the promised land. It's always a mirage that's drifting away from you even as you move forward in time. Then we have, I should have put my glasses on. That's not a form of narcissistic abuse, to not wear your glasses. Blame shifting, thank you. So blame shifting, when you're dealing with a narcissistically psychopathic, abusive personality type, of course, they never take responsibility for their actions, because that would involve a level of empathy and humility and a capacity to take external data from the environment and then change in accordance with it. So I'm never to be blamed. I am blameless. I am pure. The narcissistic worldview is based on a false ideal of the self and a false ideal of the reality. If I'm the narcissist, I have a false self, a false ideal of who I am, and a false ideal of what reality is. And I'm going to force you to live with my idealized self. I'm perfect, I'm blameless, and my hyper-idealized reality that's in accordance with what I need it to be. The truth is whatever I say it is. Very George Orwell, very 1984 style thinking. Typically, the blame will be shifted to the weather, the economy, whatever you like. If I'm a narcissist, the favorite thing to blame is going to be you, because then you'll be full of guilt and shame. So anytime you suffer, you'll be made to feel like it's you that's caused that suffering. Isolation is a very, very common tactic. I jumped past ambient abuse there. Isolation, what the narcissist will typically try to do, or anybody who's trying to control your mind, control your perceptions, is they'll put you in isolation. That means that you can only get external feedback from the environment from one source: me, the torturer, the slave master, the owner, the kidnapper. And you can't get any external feedback from other sources of information, from family, from friends, from people who would want to help you. And this is a great way of indoctrinating you. It's a great way of entraining you to only have me as a trusted source of all your feedback, all your data, all your information. We are tribal creatures. We're evolved to communicate. We're evolved to use language. We talk a lot. I certainly do. And if we're not speaking to people, we start to break down psychologically, because we only really feel ourselves as existing through our interactions with other human beings. So isolation becomes a kind of slow death. And it is used as a legitimate form of psychological torture. Indeed, across the globe, the hardest criminals, when you want to punish them, you put them in isolation, because it's so incredibly painful and such a good, effective way of breaking a person's will. Just put them on their own. So narcissistic abusers, they will isolate you. They'll also engage in something called ambient abuse. So it won't always be the case that they will actually hit you or scream at you or shout at you as such. They'll just make the living space that you're in so incredibly unpleasant and the atmosphere so torturous that you'll hate being there. Why do that? Well, if I abuse you through the ambience, through the environment, you can never really know with certainty that it's me that's done it to you. It's just your life sucks. It's in the walls, it's in the ceiling, it's in the furniture. If I hit you, you can say, well, he hit me, I remember, and there's a bruise here. He definitely did that. If I'm just off with you, or I just make situations awkward, or I just answer you in a way that's off-putting, or I'm giving you strange facial micro-expressions, or a weird amount of contact, or too little eye contact, or the inflection of the voice, you never really know. You're like, well, it feels weird. Who are you going to tell? And what are you going to tell them? He made me feel weird. Oh, well, boo-hoo for you. Did he hit you? No. Did he shout at you? No. Well, then there's nothing going on. Ambient abuse is a really nefarious, evil way of breaking down a person's boundaries and their will, because you can never really claim that it's being done to you. It's really, really savage. Thank you, Thomas. Smear campaigns. In narcissistically abusive situations, we will frequently see smear campaigns. This means that the narcissist, living in their own false reality with their own false self, they're very narrative fixated. They're very perception fixated. They're fixated on how they're controlling others' perception of themselves and their actions and of their worldview. And they're also fixated on controlling others' perceptions of you and how other people see you. So a great way of damaging people's perception of you is to engage in a smear campaign and to smear your name and to try and bring people on board with that, to say, isn't this person terrible? Look at what they believe. Look at how they talk. Look at how they dress. They must be a really awful human being. And it's a direct ad hominem attack, meaning to the person. It's not that your beliefs or your behaviors are questions. It's the essence of you. Who you are in your soul is just impure or wrong or sinful in some way. Okay, so when you're in a narcissistically abusive relationship, I've been a bit greedy here, I've put two in one, you will experience that other people don't believe you when you say that it's abusive. So you get a lot of doubt from people in your environment, and it effectively, unfortunately, it becomes another form of gaslighting. I coined a term a couple of years ago in the narcissism community, which was secondary and tertiary gaslighting. So primary gaslighting is from the abuser. Secondary gaslighting is when you go to your family and friends and you say, this person's a real piece of shit, they're horrible to me. And they say to you, well, do they shout at you? Do they hit you? Do they throw plates at you? And you say no. And they go, well, they seem nice enough to me. Because they can put up a good veneer. They can be perfectly charming. They can switch on that charm very, very effectively. And they can promote themselves, the vision of themselves as the ideal wife, the ideal husband, the ideal son, mother, religious figure, governmental agent, whatever it is. And it means that people are less likely to believe you when you say they're doing something wrong. So you get a lot of doubt from people. So when you're interacting with the environment and nobody believes you, and they doubt what you're saying to be true, you sink further into your isolation, which actually induces a state of learned helplessness, which we'll come to next. There's a layer on top of this, which is something called flying monkeys from The Wizard of Oz, where the Wicked Witch of the West, the lady with the green face, she sends those weird-looking little flying monkeys with the waistcoats on. Really creepy creatures. And the point of that is that these people will recruit other human beings specifically to attack your reputation, specifically to engage in that smear campaign. They'll hook people in, usually people who have a weak mindset, or they may even use artificial intelligence or a bot to do it. And they'll send hordes, armies of these creatures, flying monkeys, out to attack you, to attack your story, to attack your narrative, all in an effort to make you feel like you're crazy and to shame you into submission and to just get you to shut up and do as you're told. Here's a lovely one. The narcissist really enjoys demanding praise. So they'll either coerce you into praising them, or they will outright just bully you into praising them and being like, you need to appreciate what I've done for you. You should be thankful for the things that we've done for you. You should go out and clap for government bodies, which was the weirdest, most Stalinist Soviet moment of the last year and a half for me, was the idea that at a certain place and time, I should go outside and clap the sky for a government body, and my fellow countrymen did it. But I'll come back to that later. Next one, please. When you say no, they completely overreact. Yes, the narcissistic psychopath does not like having does not like boundaries. They don't like having their version of events being challenged. They certainly don't like hearing the word no. So an indication that you're in a narcissistically abusive relationship is when you set a boundary, or you challenge a narrative, or you say no to something. The reaction is completely disproportionate and totally inappropriate. They will go into, so what that would do if we use the psychological lingo, by saying no or setting a boundary, you have inflicted a narcissistic injury, and that then induces narcissistic rage. This is the boundaryless rage of a toddler who's having a complete meltdown because they're not getting their way, precisely their way that they want to get it. And when you see that happening, if you just say, oh no, I don't really want to do that, and they fly into a rage, you're probably looking at narcissistic abuse. So the two key words there are disproportionate and inappropriate. The last one that I've focused on here is a constant shifting of the paradigms of the relationship. Remember that everything that they're trying to do is to coerce your perception, and particularly coerce your self-perception. And really the skillful thing they do, I mean, if you if you put yourself in their shoes for a moment and kind of study this like it's a skill and kind of have respect for how evil and cunning this is, isn't it better if slowly over time you just gently and carefully erode the target's sense of certainty? Just whatever they think they're certain about, just little questions, little doubts in continuously, just to erode that person's sense of self, to erode their whole value system, to erode their moral philosophy, to erode their sense of right and wrong, and eventually to erode their sense of reality itself to the point where they can't tell up from down. Wonderful, now you've got them. Now where do they get their sense of up from down from? Me. I've got them. They can't tell for themselves, so they come to me, wholesale. It's interpersonal totalitarianism. You come to me. You want to know something? You come to me. All of you, I'm sure, will have read the book, which is trending on Kindle right now, unsurprisingly, 1984 by George Orwell, the famous scene between Winston, the protagonist of the book, and O'Brien, the person who is torturing him in the Ministry of Love. This is George Orwell's horrifying vision of where English socialism could go to if taken to an extreme. The party in power is called Ing Soc, and O'Brien is torturing Winston and says to Winston, how many fingers am I holding up? And he says 4, and he tortures him. I think he's racking him or electrocuting him. And he says, no, that's not good enough. It's 5. How many fingers am I holding up, Winston? And he says, it's 4. What do you want me to say? Tortures him again. He keeps doing that until eventually Winston breaks and says, 3, 4, 5, I don't know. What do you want me to say? And O'Brien replies, that isn't good enough. You're just trying to placate me. What O'Brien wants is total, non-questioning submission of the narrative. He wants Winston, he needs Winston to see 3 if he says 3 and 5 if he says 5. He doesn't want Winston to deceive himself so that he can go along to get along. No. He wants to totally burn out the circuits and the boundaries of his perception, of his target's perception, so that he's externally, I'll explain the psychology of this in the next chapter, so that he has fully externalized his locus of control. What they're looking for is an externalization of the locus of control to them, so they have total power. It's interpersonal tyranny. It's a totalitarian state. You don't think. You want to think? You come to me. I tell you what to think. You don't think. Thinking is a crime. And what do they call that in 1984? It's a thought crime. I think you've had too much to think, sir. It's time for a little bout in the Ministry of Love, and we'll sort that out of you. This is a kind of interrogation style, a kind of mental coercion style that demands total submission. You must give everything away. And if any little piece of you is still resistant of that, you're holding on to the past. You're holding on to, comrade, this is a poisonous ideology that you're still infected with it. We're not torturing you, we're educating you. We're not punishing you, we're saving you. You can look at what the Chinese are doing right now if you want to see more about that in their little camps there. So moving on from that, it's not going to be a huge jump for you to see how this applies to the narcissistic abuse of a nation. You are intelligent people. I'm sure you can draw the equivalences here. I will go through them. Do you see evidence of gaslighting, reality distortion, or the constant shifting of goalposts during this period of history that we are living through? Do you see forced conversations and narratives dominated? Can we see how the window around which certain conversations is shrinking? There are certain conversations you can have. You can seem to rebel. You can seem to question the narrative, but only so far. And if you go outside of that, you'll be punished, silenced, deplatformed, or completely ignored, or derided for being whatever shameful title they want to apply to you. The big one at the moment is conspiracy theorist. My recommendation to everybody is just get over it and say, yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist. If you let that hurt you, you're so easy to silence. I'd just be like, yeah, give me the tinfoil hat. Okay, you can call me a conspiracy theorist. These are just foolish words. In that particular case, that was a psychological Operation Counterstrike by the CIA, specifically developed for people who doubted the narrative of the JFK assassination. So Can you see that? I'm sure that you can. Future faking. Have you been promised a certain deadline that once you passed, the thing was not delivered? You said, just keep obeying us. Once we get to February the 43rd, then 1984, everything will be okay. And then it didn't, or it got worse. What about blame shifting? Do you see the shifting of blame away from governments, politicians, and governmental institutions back to other sources, like the people? Whose fault is it that our healthcare systems are crumbling? Why? I don't know if other countries are doing this. In fact, I'm sure that they are. In the UK, we have, wherever you are, even in America, even if you don't have a national healthcare system, the federal government, the government at large, still has a say in how you operate and how you're funded and how you're supplied, even if the hospital is private. But in the UK, we've got this narrative where we're saying we have to save the National Health Service. It's like the government and the people must come together because the National Health Service is failing. And I'm like, what? Hang on a second. That's public money. The NHS isn't separate to the government. Who decides how the NHS, the National Health Service, is structured and funded? The government does. But at the same time, they're saying it's failing. And I'm like, doesn't that mean you're failing? Surely that's your responsibility. Oh, we couldn't have seen this coming. You were warned about it since at least 2007. There have been open warnings again and again that the governments of the world are not prepared for a pandemic. You can't say you weren't warned. All you can say is that you didn't heed the warnings and that you weren't prepared. This has happened before. The way I like to look at this is I see it as like militarily. They call the workers of the hospitals frontline workers. Frontline is a term from the military, and what they're saying is they're underfunded and they're understaffed and they don't have equipment. So you say, okay, so basically what you're saying is there's a foreign invader, you have an army, but you didn't supply the army properly enough, and so the army is failing. So everybody has to engage in these harsh government measures because you failed to supply and equip and train the army properly. That's your fault. That's the government's fault. They're trained, they're equipped, they're supplied by them. And you say, well, that's a very extreme example. Aha, wait one moment though. This has actually happened. And it happened to the UK when we sent troops to Afghanistan. People forget. There was a period when I'm going to say 2005, 2006, the British people had to get together and send food to the troops, British troops in Afghanistan. They didn't have enough body armour, they didn't have enough armour for their vehicles, and they didn't have enough rations. So you can't say to me, oh, that's a mad conspiracy theory. It's already happened. They've done it before in another context. It's their fault. It's not your fault that their government-controlled agency that's there to do a specific job, protect people's health, isn't doing it. That's their fault. That's the government's fault. So every time they say, we need to protect the NHS, in Freudian terms, and Zizek, Slavoj Zizek, the psychoanalyst and philosopher, he uses this term a lot. That's called a fetishist split. So we fetishize the NHS and we say, well, the government and the people must come together to save this third thing. And that becomes fetishized. It becomes idealized and put on a pedestal. Clap it. Clap the government agency. Why? What are we clapping for? Don't clap them. Give them money. Don't clap them. Give them equipment. If they're underfunded or understaffed, find staff. What's clapping going to do? But it was we, so they repositioned themselves. They stood next to us, the people, and said, clap for them, the government agency. That's a classic blame shift. They just don't want to stand next to it because they want to pretend it's not them. We'll come back to that later because one of the questions that I think that we should be asking is, if we're engaging in harsh government measures, specifically to stop the collapsing of healthcare systems, what are we doing right now to fortify those same healthcare systems that were so close to collapse? The economies of the major economies of the world had to come to a standstill and are still in a standstill for over a year. So what are we doing to solve that problem? That's not part of the narrative though, is it? That's not part of the window of debate that we can have at the moment. And if you try and talk about that, you're considered a lunatic or whatever they want to call you, a conspiracy theorist or whatever. I'm quite excited then. I should probably calm down. I'll start sweating otherwise. I had a coffee before I came. It shows, doesn't it? Ambient abuse. Well, if your living experience, if your subjective lived experience is awful, this would be considered ambient abuse. There's an economic element to this. It is awful if you're in the lower middle class and below. If you're in the upper middle class and you live in a nice big house and you have free-flowing Wi-Fi and you can afford personal trainers to come round and you have a nice big garden, it's all right for you. Imagine some of these poor people, I'm not going to swear, in a situation where they can't afford internet, in a situation where they're living in a very, very cramped space. Mum, dad's off work, he's at home, there's 2 kids there, they're being homeschooled by them, there's nothing to do, and we don't have enough money to get by every day. Hell on earth. Hell on earth. Psychological torture. You want to talk about ambient abuse? Yes, but it's stratified economically. And if you're poor, sorry guys, sucks to be you. Your upper middle class politicians who are making these decisions on your behalf without a vote, without asking you, and without showing you the scientific data they're using to make these decisions, they're all right. They're okay. They can do another 6 months of this. They can do another few years of this. They're probably enjoying it. Getting excited again. Isolation. Well, we have very literal isolation in this case. There are smear campaigns. Yes, there are smear campaigns of anybody who steps outside of the dominant narrative. They will be cancelled, their videos will be removed from YouTube, and they might even have their whole YouTube channel deleted for even daring to posit some questions about the current narrative and the totalitarianistic state that we're living in right now. Is there doubt from others? Are there flying monkeys? It's really interesting what's happening on social media. You do have a number of people. I would guess it's still the majority, but it's not as big as it was before. The majority of people are not buying. Well, the majority of people are buying the narrative, but let's say maybe when this started, it was 90%. I think it shrunk significantly. I work online every day, and I try to assess through comments and usage and views of where the wind is blowing. And I can say for sure I've seen a change in public opinion over the last 10 months, 11 months, for certain. There's a lot more cynicism around about this. I do suspect, certainly in a country like the UK, probably the majority, which might be like 55% of people, they're down for this. But the other thing that we're seeing online with doubt from others and flying monkeys is a tremendous use of bots. It's a huge number. If you just take YouTube as an example of comments coming from people, they have no profile picture, and you go to their profile, there isn't a single playlist, there's no favorites, there's damn sure not any uploads, and it looks like they've only commented on 2 videos, and those 2 comments are saying pretty much the same thing, slightly edited. So are these real people or are they bots? Who knows? But we can certainly say that there have been smear campaigns against people who challenge the narrative, and the damn sure are flying monkeys at work in this, which further adds weight to the notion that we are currently the targets of a kind of broad-scale psyop, which mirrors almost perfectly what would happen in a narcissistically abusive relationship. They demand praise. We've covered that. We must clap who we're told to clap and say whoever is wonderful, whoever they tell us to say is wonderful and brave. Matt Hancock just today demanded to be thanked for his work during this period. What you say, when you say no, there's an overreaction that is inappropriate and not commensurate with the boundary being set. We've seen plenty of that, not necessarily from the government, but from people who are the flying monkeys, the bots, the people trying to run the smear campaigns, especially on social media. There is a big effort to do that phrase that they used from Event 201, which was a simulation of a coronavirus pandemic that was run in September 2019 or November 2019. And the phrase that they used a lot of was flood the zone. So when they were talking about controlling the narrative, they were saying we have to flood the zone with our ideas and not other people's ideas. Flooding the zone is a strategy. Event 201, September, October, November of 2019, the simulation of a coronavirus pandemic. They shift the paradigms of the relationship constantly. Well, I mean, at this point, there's a number of ways in which we can take this, but let me broaden the question out for you and then we can move on. What do you think your relationship is with your government now versus November 2019? Do you feel like you are being respected? Do you feel like the government is nervous about the response of its population, or do you feel like they're actually feeling pretty confident? There's actually a bit of swagger to all this. They're really not that bothered about what people think or say about what they're doing. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you're being mugged? Do you feel like you're being conned? And do you think they're nervous? Do you think they're worrying about their position of power? Or do you think they're just quite happily lording it over people? I know how I'm perceiving it. Okay, so that moves us into the next phase. I will go through this rapidly. How long have I been talking for? Do you know? 30, okay. Double binds, apathy, the CIA, and Alice in Wonderland. Okay, so the double bind is a concept from Gregory Bateson. The double bind theory of schizophrenia was something that he came up with. It basically means you put a person in a catch-22 that they can't escape. You have two conflicting communications, telling somebody to do something and then preventing them from having the ability to do it, to drive them mad. Another layer of that needs to be that they can't actually say that that's happening. And it puts them in a double bind. This is a great way of torturing people. So the CIA specifically studied double binds and the use of double binds to drive people mad and to crack them, to break their will in interrogation techniques. Again, it's not conspiracy theory. The CIA interrogation manuals, I think there's 7 of them, have been released. You can go and look them up online and you can see exactly what I'm talking about here. One of the things that they were going for is apathy. It's specifically called apathy in the CIA interrogation manual. And the reason to get that is to get people into a state of learned helplessness. According to the psychologist Martin Seligman, learned helplessness is the giving up reaction, the quitting response that follows from the belief that whatever you do doesn't matter. So if you can convince people that they will suffer no matter what they do, that there are no options in the situation, they will simply give up. They will go into a state of learned helplessness and apathy. The CIA developed something called the Alice in Wonderland technique. The Alice in Wonderland technique is a great way of doing this. What you have is a situation where you would have the target and then you put in the room 4 different interrogators. The 4 different interrogators will use different tones of voice and different inflections and stand in different parts of the room and ask the subject who's being interrogated questions about different things, or maybe just talk to them about something totally unrelated to what's going on. And you might think, well, that's a really weird thing to do. That's not particularly torturous. Imagine it going on for hours. You don't know where you are. You don't know if they're about to drag you into another room and stick electrodes up you. You don't know whether they're going to take you outside and shoot you. You know that you're being asked questions, but you're being asked questions in 4 completely different ways by 4 different people with 4 different priorities. Eventually you go mad. Alice in Wonderland. You've no idea what's going on. Your whole world view starts to break down as the situation becomes more bizarre and unlikely and absurd. There's no coordinates for you to hold on to. Something like the situation that we've been facing in the last year. I mean, and it induces a state of learned helplessness. Here's something from the CIA interrogation manual. To the trained CIA interrogator, helplessness is characterized as apathy, which may result from prolonged use of coercive techniques, which result in a debility, dependency, and dread state in the subject. However, if it's unduly prolonged, the arrestee may sink into a defensive apathy from which it is hard to arouse him. If it goes on for too long and is too much, you're almost inducing a kind of philosophical catatonia, and you won't get any useful information from the person. You won't be able to coerce their behavior anymore because they just check out. We know that this is something that is rooted in our biology because of the psychologist Seligman. What he did, it was very unethical and wouldn't pass muster today, but he took a group of 3 dogs and he had group 1 were not electrocuted. Group 2 were electrocuted, but they could stop the electrocution by doing something. They could press a lever. Group 3 were electrocuted along with group 2, and they would stop being electrocuted when the dogs from group 2 pressed the lever, but there was nothing they could do to help themselves. Group 1, not electrocuted. Group 2 had some agency. If they took an action, they could stop the pain. Group 3, they didn't know why the electricity was turning on and off. It just was. and they just sat there and took it because it was down to they were yoked to the dogs of group 2. So if the dog of group 2 didn't switch off the electricity, it didn't switch off. So group 3 went into an observed state of learned helplessness. They then took those 3 groups of dogs and they put them in another situation where you had a sort of a box, and on the platform over here there were electric shocks coming through the floor, and then there was a divider there that any dog could easily jump over, and on the other side of the box that looked exactly the same, there was no electric shock. The dogs in group 1, they got electric shocked and they moved. They said, my God, I better jump over this thing and hopefully over there it's better. They jumped and it was better. The dogs in group 2, the ones who were able to switch off the electric shock when they realized they could push a lever with their paw, they also jumped. The dogs in group 3, who'd been kept in a situation where they felt like no matter what they didn't even know the electricity was on, it was off, they couldn't control it. They lay on the floor and let themselves be electrocuted and cried. So the experimenters went, aha, okay, so they've learned to not even try to help themselves. Let's offer them treats and see if we can get them to jump. Because it was a low thing, it was like tiny. The dog could easily jump over and he would be fine, she would be fine. They offered them treats. The dogs refused treats. They said, okay, that didn't work. Let's threaten them. Let's frighten them to try and get them to go over. They still wouldn't do it. They still would not jump over. The only thing that worked, and this is critical and I'm going to come back to this point, the experimenter would have to go over, take the dog by the paws, pick him or her up, and lead them over the divider to go from the electrified side to the non-electrified side. Great. You have to physically pick them up when they're in a state of learned helplessness, and step by step, like they're puppies, show them how to escape the danger, because that's what learned helplessness does. It didn't work unless the experimenters did it 2 or 3 times. So even after the dog had been shown, go here, the pain stops, it still didn't go. They had to have it repeated 2 or 3 times. And then the dog regained agency, regained sovereignty, re-internalized the locus of control, and they go, oh my God, this hurts, and then they would jump. I'm going to come back to that. So the cure to this situation, and this is absolutely critical to everything, is number 1, you need to recognize the situation that you're in. We all need to recognize the situation that you're in. You're not here to hear the ways in which the situation is bad. You know the ways in which the situation is bad. It's interesting to get an analysis and a new perspective on exactly what's going on. It's interesting to know that it mirrors narcissistic abuse exactly, but you're here to get some sort of a sense of a strategy for getting out of this. In order to do that, we need to very, very clearly recognize that we're in a state of learned helplessness, that this is a culture war, that this is a war on consciousness. So if you're thinking, oh, I need to go out and protest, or oh, I need to go out and riot, or oh, I need to argue with people online about this and show them the light, you're wrong. It's a war on consciousness. What they've done is they've induced a state of codependency. This is what happens with the victims of narcissistic abuse. They get Stockholm syndrome. They go into a state of learned helplessness and they start to see the abuser, in this case the state, the media, the people in charge, the authority figures, as the savior. These are the very same people who are torturing them. We all do this. We start to see them as the savior. It's called trauma bonding, which is an effect of cult indoctrination. So if I take you into my cult and I love bomb you, and then I want to break your boundaries down, I might be really, really nice to you, and then I'm going to be really, really horrible to you. I might beat you up and lock you in a closet. This has actually happened, it's documented. But then, after a few hours, I'll come back in a different mood. You saw me as demonic, angry, aggressive, sadistic. I beat you. I screamed at you. I told you you're a bad person. I locked you in a dark closet. Then I'll come back smiling, nice, pleasant, empathic, warm, with food, with water, and I let you out of the closet. What happens? You start to get confused about who I am. Your boundaries break. You create a schism in your mind, and you regress over time through torture, through kidnapping. Over time, our boundaries break down and we regress back to a childlike state. We become puerile. we become adolescent. We lose our agency and we start to become dependent on the person who is abusing us. Over a long enough timeline, we become dependent on the abuse itself. We're attachment machines. We're very malleable. We have neuroplasticity. We can actually learn to become attached to and addicted to things that hurt us. It's a kind of, beyond learned helplessness, you have something called masochistic submission. You learn to love the jackboot on your neck. You learn to love the feel of chains. You learn to love the feeling of being dominated and lied to and ripped off. It's very strange and complicated, but we are strange and complicated creatures. So it's super important that we realize the relationship that we're in. It's a war on consciousness, though. And they can only get access to your consciousness if you willingly plug in to where they're speaking to you. Social media, mainstream media, the news, adverts, advertising, marketing, all of this is an opportunity to hypnotize you. You might not think that there's ideology hidden inside of an advert for trainers, but there is. You might not think there's ideology hidden inside of the latest mainstream news broadcast, but I assure you there is. It's not just political messaging, it's all the consumerist marketing messaging. It holds the coordinates of a dark, poisonous ideology inside of it that is saying to you over and over and over again, well, it's giving you multiple messages, but the key message is, don't trust yourself, do as you're told, you are not enough, there is something wrong with you, and you need something or someone from the outside to give you something that corrects your issues to be okay and in order to function inside of the world. We mentioned before moving the dog's legs. So what does that mean here? And what does simulating potential realities beyond this one mean? If we're going to move the dog's legs, we have to train ourselves as though we were these poor, abused puppies in this horrible experiment who've internalized an idea of doom and dread and dependency, which is the 3 Ds of the CIA interrogator's manual. Doom, dread, dependency. Nothing I do is going to change anything. We're all living like that now, to a degree. Even those of us who are psychologically literate, we still get beaten down. We're all living with this idea, nothing I do can change anything, so why do anything? Perfect. That's exactly what they want. That's exactly what they want. Don't resist. Don't try and change anything. Just do as you're told. Yes, it sucks. Yes, you don't have the liberties you had yesterday. The things that you thought were your God-given rights are now privileges to be given and taken to you at will. God knows how long we've got before the full Chinese social credit system is installed, but we're already on that pathway, as we can clearly see. It's a medical tyranny. The goalposts have shifted multiple times in the UK alone on that one issue. Will you need a vaccine to travel? Will you need a vaccine to go to work? Will you need a vaccine to go to the gym? Medical tyranny. You will need a vaccine passport for all these things eventually. So the goalposts are shifting all the time. And of course it creates learned helplessness. But we have to move the dog's legs. You have to remind yourself again and again, because the dog's needed help 2 or 3 times, that the idea that there's nothing you can do about this is false. It's a false reality. It's the reality these people want you to live in. Submit, you can do nothing. You need everything through me, through us. Only we can tell you what to do. It's false. It's not true. It's a trick. Actually, it's a fairly fragile trick. It's fragile to the extent that it's easy to break, but you need to realize you can break it. And because most people don't realize they can break it, it becomes, therefore, a robust trick. It's only when you start deconstructing the deception that you see there's not very much to it. Moving the dog's legs. We can move from the electrified zone just a little jump. It's not even going to take that much into a non-electrified zone. But we need to remind ourselves of that. And one way of doing that is if you're going to imbibe a certain amount of ideological poison and mainstream brainwashing, you've got to counterbalance that by imagining the kind of world you do want to live in. And you might say, what is this, the law of attraction? We're just going to sit at home and visualize? But you already are sitting at home and visualizing. That's what they get you to do. Another 10,000 dead today. Good evening. And later the weather. You're sat at home visualizing. You're willingly doing that, but you don't want to do the opposite and imagine a world in which that's not happening. Why? I told you, this is a war on consciousness. You must take your consciousness back. You have to reclaim your conscious space. Otherwise, it will continue to be used. This will never end. The measures will never end. The lockdowns will never end. There'll be a new pandemic unless you take your consciousness back. And it can't be done for you. I can't save you. This other person over there can't save you. You must save yourself. It has to be your choice. You have to take back your own consciousness. You have to imagine a world with a better education system, a better entertainment system, a better way of doing politics, a better way of doing whatever it is. We have to consistently and with a degree of urgency and determination imagine a new world. We're suffering from the death of new ideas right now. We were suffering from the death of new ideas before all of this took place. We were on a downward spiral of ideas. Music, films, everything is a remake of a remake of a remake. Everything is a remix of a remix of a remix. Because we've been going into a state of learned helplessness for a while. We have to push beyond the boundaries of what we've been shown. We have to try and do something new. And that is going to involve reminding ourselves that this isn't the only way to live. History is not written. It's not done. It's being written. We're not out of it watching it like it's a TV show. We're all sat there going, oh, this TV show fucking sucks. Do something about it then. Do something. Don't just let this happen. Don't be passive. Question something. Ask a question. Push back a little bit. How easy have we made it for these people to do this? And then the last thing I would suggest on this chapter is that you need to re-internalize the locus of control. You've been given a false narrative, a false consciousness, a false reality that other forces outside of you are controlling every element of your life. And right now they are. But that's not the only option for living. We don't have to give up control at every opportunity. We can actually take some of that back. We can reclaim and re-internalize the locus of control. The locus of control in psychology means your perception of where the power lies in your life. When you are abused, when you are over-propagandized to, when you are over-marketed to, when you are indoctrinated into mainstream gross, as in base, two-dimensional reality, your sense of what you're capable of and what is possible alters to that. So we need to reclaim that space. We need to take it back. And we really need to do that by cleaning up, having good hygiene in your consciousness. Don't let bad ideas in. Don't let bad people in. It's got to be down to you, though. I can't do that for you. You have to do it for yourself. So another thing that we would do with somebody who's actually on a one-to-one level, being the victim of narcissistic abuse, is we would do a check of what the narcissistic abuse has done to us, what the effects are, and seek to heal them. I'm not going to give you a full rundown of what narcissistic abuse can do to a person. The effects are deleterious if it goes on for long enough. It makes people mentally sick. It affects the hormonal system. If the damage is done enough, it can actually affect your brain in ways that are measurable. It can change the shape of and the functionality and the volume of certain portions of your brain if the trauma is bad enough. All healable, all takes time, it can be healed. You can get stress-related issues, gut problems, muscle problems, nervous system problems, skin problems even, all as a result of having your sense of your reality denied, all from a sense of being made to feel like you're completely crazy over time. We must identify them all and seek to heal them one by one. Avoid being re-traumatized with a no-contact policy and grey rock technique. In the narcissistic abuse community, when we say no contact, which I believe is a concept developed by Sam Vaknin, it means the least contact you have with the abuser, the less possibility there is for them to gaslight you and drive you completely bonkers. The grey rock technique is a technique where you try to bore the abuser away. If you create drama, protests, violence, riots, you're going online and you're screaming and you're doing this and that and getting all red-faced, you're actually feeding the beast. They're ready for that. They've been ready for that for decades. Your name just goes on a list, and if you keep going, they'll do you in. They won't even lift a finger. They won't break a sweat. They'll take their time. They won't even rush, because that's how locked down the game is right now. Don't do it. We're going for no contact or minimal contact and grey rock. Check out, man. Unplug. Unplug. It's a simulated reality. I don't mean this in some weird woo-woo way. When you go into like trying to imagine what's happening in other places in the world to other people that you can't see, and you're doing it through statistics and numbers. That is the definition of a virtual world. That's a simulated reality. Your reality is you sat at home with your cat on your lap drinking a cup of tea. That's your reality, and that's your business. If you can come back to that more and check out and unplug, it's going to be easier for you. It's going to be less painful for you, and they'll have less control over you. And then the last part of that is de-blobbing and undoing the demoralization propaganda and the shame programming. When I say blobbing here, I mean people are kind of being turned into jellyfish, and they've been globbed and blobbed into collectives. So there's this, at the moment, there's this big thing around collective identity. It's really humiliating to be shoved into a collective. Don't let people do that to you, either by your skin pigmentation, your cool hair, your really nice black t-shirt. People who wear black t-shirts, we have a lot to say about them. My hair is looking fine though, right? What do you say, Pierre? It's looking good, right?
It's great, you just got it cut, right?
I certainly didn't, because that would be illegal. I did not get it cut, Your Honor. Yes, I cut it myself with some nail scissors. So letting yourself being globbed into a collective where it's like, oh, you people, you conspiracy theorists, you this, you conservatives, you liberals, don't glob people, don't blob people, and don't let them do it to you. You're an individual. Don't go in with a collective. Forget all that. There's no resolution through collectives. It's cowardice. You think by hiding on somebody else's team and following the leader that you're going to go somewhere good. It's the Pied Piper. You're lemmings. I think it's Joe Stalin's term, useful idiot. You're a useful idiot. If I'm convincing you to fulfill my ideological objectives, well, you think that's for you, you moron? That's for me. That isn't for you. You take my ideological infection, you be a soldier in my army, and you do what I want you to do. Yeah, you pick my side. See where that gets you. So don't let yourself be blobbed. The other side of blobbing and globbing is becoming like a jellyfish, becoming an unidentifiable jellyfish and just losing all your sense of individuality, all of your boundaries, all of your sense of self, and going with the flow. Only dead fish go with the flow. We have to undo the demoralization propaganda and the shame programming that you've been subjected to as well. You don't realize it. We've all been demoralized. We're all being shamed all the time in submission. The message is you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And if you're not wrong, your people are wrong. And if you're not wrong, people who wear black t-shirts are wrong. That's the game we're in right now. It's to make cowards of us all. It's to make us feel like we're just bad. Because if you feel like you're a shitty, crappy person, why are you going to fight for yourself? What was the point of, like, I'm not going to pick up a weapon and fight you. I just deserve to just sit here and let the opposing enemy do whatever they want to me. Not even worth fighting for. Demoralization and humiliation and shame, powerful psychological tools. It doesn't really matter whether what we're facing right now is communism on the left or fascism on the right. You can certainly see traits of both in the situation we're in right now. So you have the left, the right, but you also need to be aware of the other points of the political compass. Up is totalitarianism, and down is, loosely speaking, libertarianism. So there's people who like liberty, and then there's people who like to put the emphasis for the decisions made on their life on the state. You're either individualistic or you're collectivistic. You're statist or you're libertarian. This is all up right now. It doesn't matter whether it's leftist, rightist, fascist, communist. It could be Hitler, it could be Stalin. At certain points, they were barely distinguishable anyway. But it is statism. It's you will be told what to do, and if you don't, you're in trouble. Where's the democracy? How is this a civilized Western liberal democracy? When you say, well, it isn't. Okay, fine, it isn't. Then let's stop pretending that it is. That's the pain right now. That's the cognitive dissonance. We're all walking around going, oh, we're free. Look at us in the first world. Aren't we clever in our civilized Western liberal democracies? And it sucks because we know it's not true. Let's just get past that point and say, okay, it's not true. This is totalitarianism. It's kind of a soft totalitarianism. All right, cool. Now I know where I am. It sucks. I am being tortured. I knew I was being tortured. I thought I was being educated for a second there because my comrade, as he was beating the soles of my feet, told me it was for my own good. And it's not for my own good. It's for their good. All right, now I can start to cope with the horror of the situation. We have a quote here from Yuri Bezmenov. A person who is demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell him nothing. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents and pictures, he will refuse to believe it. That's the tragedy of the situation of demoralization. This is powerful stuff, folks. If you can have your courage and your morality and your morale stolen from you, it doesn't matter what facts are presented to you. It doesn't matter what questions are asked. It doesn't matter what contramanding data is put there. You'll just deny it because you're completely demoralized and you're in a state of learned helplessness. There are many people who are in this state, by the way, who think that they're being virtuous. This is so evil. It's so cunning. They've made it so that if you're cowardly and obedient, you can recast that as a kind of virtue, as a virtuous thing to do. I am the biggest coward. I am the most submissive, obedient, and that makes me the best. I don't wear 2 masks. 2 masks? You monster. I'm on 6. Look at me. I got 6 masks. I put them over my ears, eyes, everything. I'll never stop masking up because I'm the biggest coward. I'm a bigger coward than you, and that makes me better than you. There's another quote here. I love this quote. I love this quote. Political correctness is communist propaganda writ small. In my study of communist societies, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, not to inform, mention the news at this point, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better. This is from Anthony Daniels, a British psychiatrist who worked in the British prison service. His father was a Russian businessman who was raised in the Soviet Union. When people are forced to remain silent, when they are being told the most obvious lies, or even worse, when they are forced to repeat the lies themselves, they lose once and for all their sense of probity. To assent to obvious lies is in some small way to become evil oneself. One standing to resist anything is thus eroded and even destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. I think if you examine political correctness, it has the same effect and is intended to. A society of emasculated liars. I do see the benefits of political correctness. I'm not insane. Like, we shouldn't hurt people with our words. That would be cruel. But when it's taken to the point of just narrowing that which you can discuss and which you can say in the name of political correctness, that's kind of like a faux political correctness, I start to complain because we need some liberty. We need some freedom. We need to be able to discuss things that are uncomfortable and weird and strange and spooky so we can figure them out. It's a lack of trust. We don't trust each other anymore. We don't trust ourselves. It's like we don't believe in the intellectual immune system anymore. We're not robust. Let the virus of other ideas come to me. I'm intellectually robust. My immune system works. I'm not scared. So I'm now going to start rounding this out by offering you a cogent strategy. I'm going to come back to this. We must develop a moral philosophy and a value system as a filter to ideological messaging. We're very, very messaged to in the times that we're living through. Very, very heavily messaged to. And we need to consider that. And we need to be compassionate to ourselves and to other people. Don't get nasty with people who don't see the world like you do. Don't start calling people sheeple or acting like you're enlightened and have all the information they don't. We're all being bombarded by this crap. I am not surprised that people just go along with it because they're over-messaged to. It's completely overwhelming. The human brain isn't evolved for this amount of data and information and conflict. It's too much. So of course we go into learned helplessness. We do, however, need a moral philosophy based on certain values in order to filter out the ideological crap. The values I would suggest that we focus on: being robust, being resilient, believing in your own intellectual immune system, believing in yourself, that you are not thin-skinned, you're not hypersensitive, you're not made of sugar, you're not going to break easily, that you can take conflict, that you can take robust debate, that you're resilient, that you're strong, that your body works, your immune system works, you're alive. You don't need authorities or governments to give you permission to live because you have skin, you have lymphocytes. We discussed this last night, Thomas, did we not? T lymphocytes he was telling me about. You've got your little special forces soldiers inside of you. They kill the enemy. It's all good, man. Trust yourself. Trust yourself physically. Trust yourself psychologically. Seek to be resilient and robust physically. Be as healthy as you can physically and as healthy and robust as you can psychologically and spiritually. Be informed. Take as much data as you can. Do your own research. Don't be lazy. We have so much information now that we can get access to. Just take the time. Take the 15 to 30 minutes. I know some of this information it's hard. It might be outside of your own personal preference, but read, find the data, find the information, assess the source. Don't just take it because it's written in black and white on the internet, my God. But inform yourself. Learn to think. Don't just take on content. Think about the context in which this data is coming through. How can I improve the quality of my thinking? How can I make it so I know how to think and not just what to think? So be informed. That would be a good value for this particular issue that we're facing. Reclaim your agency. Be the dog that jumps from the painful place to the painless place. It wasn't even a very high barrier. Re-internalize your locus of control. Assume that when things happen in your life, it's not just down to you bearing the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune whilst being bobbed along on a tempestuous sea, but that you have the power to change your life. You have the power to change reality. You have the power to kick politicians out. If you don't like what they're doing, we could do something about that. They're only people with jobs. They're not gods. So another value would be boundaries. Let's have good boundaries. Let's have open, free debate and good boundaries. We can stay polite, we can stay clear, we can follow the rules of debate, maybe we can re-clarify them again, we can engage in the Socratic method a little bit more, we can be respectful, we can listen to each other. We don't have to do this weird thing that everybody's taking drama over reason at the moment. So they think debate is two people shouting at each other. It's the journalists that have made us think this way. If it's not a hostile, aggressive, badgering interview, it's barely an interview at all. Calm down. How about two people just talking? What's wrong with that? Why does everything have to be so hot and adrenalized? It's more of this kind of externalization of self, trying to live as an avatar in the virtual reality, because when you come back to yourself, you just feel numb and empty because you've been totally overstimulated. You should sit alone. Get bored sometimes, man. Switch down the stimulation, unplug a little bit, just sit, have a cup of tea, look out the window and get calm. It's really good for you. Take a break. And then the last value that I would really want to push on people, because I'm a savage dictator to be, is I'm a benevolent dictator though, Thomas, it'll be all right, is the willingness to take risks. We have become too risk averse. I understand in certain situations of high threat, especially when the threat is novel, you should lean towards a conservative, I'm very Scouse then, conservative. You should lean towards a conservative, careful attitude. I agree with that when you're first gathering the data. But this is just crazy now. This is insane. Life is risk. We're all going to die, right? Have people forgotten? Humans, they die. We're all going to die. That's good to remember. What's it called? Memento mori, I think that's called in Latin. We should all have a little skull hanging around somewhere. We don't know how long we've got. We as human beings, we don't live that long. Just as you're figuring it out, your bits and pieces start falling off and then you're dead. Okay? That's life. Just live with it. Everybody throughout human history lived with that fact, and we're in this weird time in history where we're doing everything we can to try and avoid that simple fact. Everybody dies. Everybody you know will be dead. You will be dead. And all of our names will be forgotten in about 1,000, 2,000 years. It's fine. It's not a big deal, man. Don't hold on. Don't be so narcissistic. It comes, it goes. Let it be. Just let it flow. It's fine. The pain is in holding on, because you're holding on to quicksand. You can't do it. That's the original meaning of dukkha. It's not, the source of suffering in Buddhism is not attachment, it's craving. Just stop craving. Let it go. It's going to go, so let it go. Okay, these are the last few points of my prescription for how we can make things better for ourselves in this war on consciousness. We can ask calm, polite, informed, clear but consistent questions. So we can ask questions of the people who need to be questioned. If somebody or an agency or a body is telling you, you must do this, this and this, don't scream, don't get hysterical, don't get angry. That's how they win. If you're angry and upset, you look crazy. You look and sound uninformed and crazy. You're spewing out word salad. It sounds like conspiracy theory nonsense. We've got to level up. Like if you want guidance from me, I would say I expect you to level up. You must present an argument more clearly. It needs to be precise. It needs to have intellectual rigor. Take your time. Ask questions. It's the most innocent, reasonable thing in the world. Ask a question. You must follow the government measures or else terrible thing will happen. Really? Can you tell me how you know that? Well, it's the science. Oh, the science. There's a the science now, because there wasn't a year ago. There was just science. And science, typically, if I remember this correctly, when you want to make a statement in science, it needs to be something called, what is it? Peer-reviewed before it's suitable to be published. That means your peers, fellow scientists, review the claims you're making and say yay or nay so that it passes muster to be published. Where's the peer-reviewed science in any of this? Show it to me. I will be an obedient citizen. I will do as I'm told if I know why I'm doing it. We should be able to have that conversation. We should be able to open up that channel of communication from down to up and say, hey, big boss, in power of my whole life and the economy and the mental health of these children that's falling apart, can you just give us a little bit more information? You're saying just do as you're told, follow the science. Let's follow the science. How are you figuring out? We need to see you're working out. This is totally normal in science, by the way. It's totally normal for your peers to just look and you have data and you came to a conclusion. That's fine. You might be right. Can we see how you came to that conclusion? May we please see the minutes of the meetings that led you to the conclusion that there was no other option than this? And it had to take this long and it needed these measures. Can we just be involved in that conversation? Seeing as you're expecting complicity from us, seeing as you're expecting consent, can we just have a little data come back the other way? There's not too much to ask. Ask good questions. Narcissists dread exposure of the false self or of the false narrative. So one of the things that we can do is we can stay good-humored, we can stay intellectually rigorous, and we can satirize what's happening, and we can question what's happening, and we can use their favorite tactic against them. If you want to change what's happening right now, you should rely heavily on reason, satire, human, Freudian slip, humor and human, they're so close, and shame. Shame them into submission. Shame them into changing what they're doing. Show them how ridiculous their statements are. Show them how, just feed it back to them. It's like, this is what you told us to do 6 months ago. This is what you're telling us to do now. Can we get some explanation, please? Rather than you just standing on our necks and saying, do as you're told, shut up or else. Let's pretend we're still in a civilized Western liberal democracy for a minute. Let's keep role-playing that until the wheels fall off. And then we can say, okay, well, so we're in a tyranny then. Fine, we're in totalitarianism. But let's get out of this cognitive dissonance of are we, aren't we? And this is how we should push forward, in my humble opinion. Remember, all of these people are just people. They are not gods, and you are not powerless. They have to put their socks on every day, and if you don't give them water regularly, they die, the same as me and you. They're just people. They're just people doing jobs. I think some of what's going on is essentially profiteering, and we probably should be talking about pandemic profiteering. That should probably be part of the broad-scale narrative at the moment, and people being called out for that. The sooner the better. There is legitimate nefarious conspiracies, and then I think there's just incompetence. And if you didn't care about the consequence of your actions, why would you bother not to be incompetent? Why wouldn't you steal a little bit? Why wouldn't you give contracts to your mates? It's a time of and then just say it was a time of crisis. We had to do it. We had no choice. Yes, it's made me very wealthy. Yes, it's made my friends very wealthy. Yes, it's opened up doors for me. But, I think I deserve praise and thanks for operating so well in a time of crisis. We need to question these things. They're not gods. We are not powerless. We're not the dog on the electricity thing that can't move. It just gets up and moves. Just a little bit. Just move a little bit. And then you'll have a reference experience and be like, oh, wow, I really am not powerless. Stay disciplined. Stay optimistic. We must engage in consistent daily action en masse with clarity of intent if we want to see change. History is not yet written It is being written. So don't let yourself fall into despair and learned helplessness. Om Shanti Shanti. I'm going to take questions now, and they're going to be vetted by Pierre, so they better be good. If you can make them one sentence long and end in a question mark, that would be great. You can send over the questions to coach@spartanlifecoach.com.
Sound check 1, 2. Can you hear me? All right, good to go. Are you ready, Mr. Grannon?
Oh, yeah.
My question is, what would you say to those people who say the world needs to be governed and controlled, that without some form of control, the world would go to shit? If everyone was left to their own devices, there would be anarchy. Just my opinion.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I am not an anarchist. The question presumes that I'm an anarchist, and I think I think it's a kind of utopianism to sort of think that humans have evolved to the point where we could just turn off government, turn off police. I really that kind of Marxist utopianism really turns me off, because, you know, I worked as a nightclub bouncer for 12 years in different places all over the world, and I have seen human nature at its worst, and I do not fantasize that left to our own devices everything would be okay. I think it would be hell on earth. I wanted to be in the army. I wanted to be in the police. I believe in those institutions. I believe in the principle of the use of force. It is sometimes absolutely necessary to use force, because there are bad people out there. But here's another question. It doesn't really counter your question. Well, who was it? What was it? Who was it from? What does it say?
Let me get back to it here.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Put you on the spot there.
PDAR.
PDAR. So I don't really, I see the question, the implications behind your question, so I hope now that I've made my position clear that clarifies that for you. Not to counter your question, but perhaps to add to that line of reasoning, which is a great line of reasoning. How big does the government need to be? How big does the military need to be? How big does the police need to be? What should the powers of each, be? What should the relationship between police and civilian, military and civilian, government and civilian be? Who's checking? Who's checking? Like, how big, how many police is too many police? What powers should they have? Should they be a military style police, a paramilitary style police force? Should they, for example, use their resources like their drones to monitor people taking walks on their own in the countryside in Derbyshire and then post it to their Twitter account to shame them? And I think they called the civilians in question idiots for taking a walk. It was during lockdown. You weren't supposed to do it, but they weren't in danger. You can't catch COVID from a hedge, and you can't give, as far as I'm aware, COVID to a rabbit that you're walking past. I mean, unless you're very close to it, in which case, arrest them. So is this a good use of should the police be checking whether kids are meeting up outside of school? Should the kids be telling people off should the police be telling people off they're going to the beach? I don't know the answers to these questions. Thank God. I mean, it's very complicated, but hang on a second. We do pay people a lot of money to ask those questions. So it's not good enough that they can't answer them, and it's not good enough that they're not enforcing the rule of law. That's the power we give them every day. We renew, we start again. We give them the power again. Are they doing their jobs? How big does the government need to be? How big is relative to the size of the population that we have? How big is the UK government now? How much money is it taking? How many jobs are there? How much has it expanded in the last 30 years? Who's policing it? Is it growing exponentially and needlessly just in a self-serving fashion? That's another question. So I would be for government, for police, for military, but it should only ever be as large as is absolutely necessary, and that should be regularly checked. It should be regularly shrunk. We should have the smallest government, the smallest police, and the smallest military we need that we can get by with. It should never go beyond the necessary amount, depending on the objectives and the threats faced. So I hope that that helps.
The next question here is from Charlie. What would you say is the most important thing to remind ourselves in a moment when we are experiencing fear or anxiety?
Is the fear justified? Is the anxiety justified? Is there a real physical threat here? Is the threat symbolic? Is it a threat to an ideological stance? Assume a positive intent with fear and with anxiety. What's it trying to tell me? I assume that I'm an intelligent entity, that I've evolved over millions of years, and that there's no bad emotions, there's no wrong emotions, that the body isn't trying to just torture me with upsetting and painful emotions. It's trying to protect me. And it's trying to lead me away from danger, and pain, and towards safety and pleasure. It's trying to take me away from death and death-inducing scenarios, figuratively or literally, and it's trying to lead me towards life-affirming scenarios. So that's important. Is it real? Is it figurative, the threat? And what could the fear and anxiety be trying to take you away from and move you towards? So assume a positive intent. I would say that's quite important.
This question here is from Laura. It's a bit longer, so I'll summarize here. There's been a massive farmland purchase from very prominent figures, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, as to name a few. Do you think that their aims would be considered benevolent, for example, feeding the world, or would it be more in line with something for the long lines of the Georgia Guidestones and stuff of that nature?
I think that it should be out there for public debate. I think that it should be something that, you know, journalists, if they're doing their jobs, they should be looking into. The major news networks that we, the rest of humanity, pour our money and time and attention into, we should pressure them to ask those questions. I mean, this is a question for journalists and politicians. We have anti-monopoly laws. We have laws in the Western world to stop people from becoming oligarchs. Are they being enforced? Are they being sidelined? Are these people, is there evidence that these people are paying their way out of developing monopolies? Are they paying taxation the way they should? Are they obeying the law the laws in the way that they would need to, the same way as you and I do? Are they is Bill Gates being allowed to give the BBC millions and millions of pounds, only then to be interviewed by the BBC as some sort of world health expert and authority, when the last time I checked he was a flipping computer programmer? You know, who's stopping that? And are we asking our governments to do their jobs and intervene? We have, or we had, the rule of law. There was accountability. If that's over and it's just survival of the fittest and it's neo-feudalism, we're going to have a few feudal lords and the rest of us, the middle class, will be gutted and the rest of us are just to be peasants. If that's the situation that we're facing, let's talk about that. At the very least, we should be able to converse the future of our status in the world. Are we moving, as technology moves forward, is civilization itself moving backwards? We should be asking these questions. It should be out there. I'm a YouTuber who produces content on psychology and philosophy. I'll do my part, but I'm not paid to ask those kinds of questions. You, everybody watching this, you are paying people, like it or not, to ask these questions and to enforce that law. Every piece of food you buy, every piece of clothing you have on, the car you drive, the fuel, the films you're watching, everything is licensed and taxed. Whether you like it or not, your governments are being paid by you all day, every day. You can't fart without paying them. So go and ask your government, like, what are you doing? Where's the oversight? Why are we letting billionaire oligarchs buy up farmland? And why is it available? Why is it available to be, who owned it a year ago? Did those people go out of business and now it's available? Like, journalists, please, politicians, please do your jobs.
The next question comes from Miss Lorraine here. What should we do to try to wake up people who are blissfully following the government, putting everyone at risk, and think that we are conspiracy theorists, etc.?
Nothing. Leave people alone. Leave your friends alone. Leave your family alone. You do you. You do the best for you and yours, your dependents, your family, the people closest to you. But leave your mates alone. Leave other people alone. There's a kind of a fetishization that can occur in activism where we think we're doing something to change the world, but it's like, what do they call it? Clicktivism. It's sort of dismissively called. You have a few arguments on Facebook, you post an edgy meme on Instagram. It's not doing anything. It's a war on consciousness. The consciousness is yours. You have power in your own realm. That's where you should be taking and claiming power. You think your friend needs to wake up because you think they're asleep, or this person should do that, or that person should do the other thing. That's your assessment, man. But just leave them alone. You do you. You do you. You and yours. The people who are in your sphere of influence.
The next question is something I would like to know as well. Any advice for us content providers and bloggers who are attacked by internet trolls in their own comment section?
Yeah.
Do we try to carry on respectful debate? The idea of censoring our own comments seems to fly in the face of free speech and what we were standing for.
Yeah, free speech, where do I start with that one? So we're living in a very boundaryless time, and all of our boundaries are eroded, and our sense of, we've got this like boundary phobia now, where we think to set a boundary is evil, and that everything is boundaryless. Free speech is not a boundaryless concept. It's a very misunderstood concept. We protect the ability for people to voice opinions that are not our own. In my humble opinion, that does not apply to trolls at all. You said troll, so they're gone. You simply delete them. Anybody who comes to me to argue or discuss in good faith is welcome. They can be angry, they can be passionate, but they must not engage in logical fallacies. You should look up logical fallacies. There's a lot of them, but the two that you see online frequently is straw man. They accuse you of saying things that you simply didn't say, in which case, how are you going to argue? I mean, that's an unwinnable argument. It's like that double bind. I can't remember. I've got a feeling it's Greek in origin. I get you in a courtroom and I say, how often do you beat your wife? It's just a presupposition that you beat your wife. It's like putting words in your mouth. I'm putting behaviors, I'm assigning behaviors and beliefs to you that you don't even have. So if you try and argue with that, you literally can't. You're always on the back foot. You're always on the ropes. You're starting on the ropes. Don't argue with them. Just block it, delete them, block them. They're arguing in bad faith. They don't want to debate you. They pretend they want to debate you. It's false. It's a narcissistic, psychopathic deception. Totally false. Block them. A troll who is trolling must be blocked. That's not contrary to the idea of free speech. Free speech is not boundaryless. It doesn't mean any idiot can say whatever the hell they want. It means if I don't like your speech, I still have to leave space for it and to tolerate it. It doesn't mean I tolerate abuse. It doesn't mean I tolerate threats. It doesn't mean I tolerate just a torrent of logical fallacies and people arguing in bad faith. So, straw man is one major logical fallacy that's used all the time. The other one is ad hominem. People attack your character. If I don't like what you said about this political situation or that, I don't need to glob you and be like, well, you would say that because you're the black t-shirt with the hair guy. So you people, you always think that. That's ad hominem. You would think that because you're a coward. You would say that because you're babidi boobidi, whatever it is, it's globbing. So there's ad hominem. It means to the person, because our ideas about where debate comes from is classical Greek philosophy. And it was considered a sin to go from attacking the argument to attacking the man. It literally means to the man. You don't do that. So yeah, trolls, just block them. You're not offending free speech by blocking trolls. You're helping free speech. It is to protect the speech of an oppositional voice who's coming to you in good faith. Even if they loathe your position or you loathe theirs, you can still debate in good faith, and trolls do not come in good faith, so just block them. What do you think of that, Pierre?
Not too bad.
You don't like blocking
I'll
people, though, do
remember
you?
that. I guess I'll do it now because you said
There
so.
you go.
The next one's from Karen.
Hi, Karen.
How to deal with losing friends and family who buy into the mainstream narrative and therefore face being alone.
I really, really dislike the idea that anybody would be losing friends and family over this. Look, please hear me, because this could so easily be misinterpreted. Be compassionate. There is a reason why people are going with the mainstream narrative. I remember with 9/11, I was getting really frustrated with my friends and family. I was like, here's the data, just look at these simple facts. The official narrative is clearly nonsense. And I don't know, after like a couple of months, I was like, I just think this is cruel. I just don't think I'm being kind. I'm talking to people who are upwardly mobile, but they were very working class. They're from the north of England. It's not an ethnically diverse, open-minded area. They've paid taxes their whole life. They're invested in the thing. They live in the village. They live in the mindset of, and they're not bad people. Like, they're just trying to live. They're just trying to get by. They're not trying to hurt anyone. They just want to make money, buy bigger houses, buy nicer cars, and have some financial security and take 2 holidays a year, maybe just 1. You know? It's a normal English life. What are you hitting them with all this crap about Osama bin Laden and all of that? Like, if you know people who want to talk about that, you take it to them. This is me to me. That's what I would say to me. It's not my job to proselytize and to preach to people. Of course they don't want to hear that. Because once you, and this is a really good question actually, it's like a broader point. Why are people going along with the mainstream narrative? Well, think of the alternative. You think your government is evil? Of course that makes me hysterical and insecure and angry with you. You're ruining my life, dude. It's not kind. Don't tell me the government is evil. That means I'm a shill. That means I'm a slave. That means my life has no meaning. It's awful. When I went through the whole 9/11 experience, I lost a career because of 9/11. I was due to join the army. I'd been accepted for officer training. They were going to pay for my university. I was going to hang around with a bunch of toffs at Sandhurst and be an officer. I was going to go to military intelligence. I was going to try my hand for MI5. A whole life was open for me. And then these stupid YouTube documentaries came out. And I was like, well, I fucking can't go now. You pricks. You've ruined it. And there was a whole life that was mapped out for me. My life would be very, very different if it wasn't for that. But I looked and I was like, if they're going to lie about this, then the invasion of Afghanistan is frankly bewildering. Like, why did we go? Like, who was there that had anything to do with that? And then Iraq and everything that came afterwards was completely illegitimate. And we went from being a largely peacekeeping force at that time to a sort of neo-colonialism. We became, like, the military became, well, as those of you who know your history of the last, 17, 18 years of war now, it started to get farmed out to private contractors more and more. And people on the outside were like, why would you farm it out to private contractors? And it's like, why wouldn't you? They were using the national armies of multiple nations kind of like private contractors anyway. What's the difference? The difference is if I hire somebody from Blackwater versus the British Army to do this job, when somebody from Blackwater is shot dead or killed with an IED, I don't have to pay off his family. I don't have to pay off the family for the rest of the time because they're on a different kind of contract scheme where they get paid more daily, but if you die, you might get a little payout, but it's nothing compared. So it's cheaper to do this. If they torture some of the locals and the civilians, you can just disavow them and say, well, they were, lone cocaine addicted, steroid using lunatics, as happened again and again. Those of you who know your history on that one, these military contract firms, they had to change their names multiple times. Why? Because of the way in which they were being used. So you have national armies and then you have military contractors, and they were just being completely misused the entire time to keep the growth of opium going. Oh, he started on one of his conspiracy theories now.
Speaking of which, hi Richard from Maria.
Hi, Maria. Hola, Maria.
I am so scared that vaccines will become mandatory. I do not want this injected in my body, and I know I'm not alone. How do we handle this if it happens?
I think, as I said before, we've got to be consistent, we've got to be determined, and we need to keep, with clarity of intent, politely and loudly asking the questions. And we need to maintain a sense of humour so that we don't fall into despair and denial and dependency. And just, we just got to keep asking the question. As we're being railroaded towards that, there will need to be some resistance for it. I mean, my field, psychology. I'm not a politician. We can ask as a group, people who do know, we can ask our local politicians, what can we do to resist this? What's a peaceful, civilized, law-abiding, but clear way of showing resistance to this? We're not alone. We're not alone. There's plenty of people who think that this is a terrible idea, because it obviously is an awful idea. The British government itself said that it wouldn't do that. It said it's discriminatory. You can't do that. So they themselves said just 3 weeks ago, we definitely won't do that. And then 3 weeks later, they reversed it. So we're not alone in this. We're not alone in this, and it's not over yet.
From Beatrice.
Hi, Beatrice.
For those of us living under military dictatorships, or will soon, do you believe that there is a non-violent way to shift towards democracy?
I mean, I would like to believe that there is. This is why I say we really sort of need, you need to have the right attitude with this. I suppose that at this particular point, it's February, we're getting towards the end of February 2021. So over the next 6 months, we really need to pressure test whether we still live in a liberal democracy or not. So the ways that people would, in a law-abiding way, affect change in the law, historically, we should try those first. But non-violence, of course. I've trained riot police. I've trained police in America, Canada, and in the UK, and I specifically trained the riot police, the riot police centre of the UK. These people are so ready for you to be violent. They want you to be violent. It just plays into people's hands. There's literally no point. There's no point. And it's just not necessary right now to be violent. So absolutely we should be non-violent. We should detach, we should unplug, we should have a sense of humour, we should remain rational, and we should openly and loudly and consistently and politely and intelligently ask the question again and again. I really think the only way we're going to affect change here is through shame. And you might say, that's a bit of a low tactic. And I'm like, well, they started it, so let's shame them back. Let's shame them into saying, okay, we just can't do this. If everybody goes along with it, because there's no resistance, then they'll do it. But if people politely, but consistently and loudly, with a sense of humour, maintaining their humanity, question these things, they will have to change it. They will have to change it. Or they'll have to admit that liberal democracy is over and we are living in a totalitarianistic state. And I really don't think they want to do that. Not yet. I really don't think they want to do that. So we push them until they either fold or they push back and say, right, democracy's over. In which case you go, okay, so we're in a different state then. And then I do a different seminar.
If any at all.
If any at all, yeah.
From Melissa, how do you define the intellectual immune system?
Well, I only really invented it during a podcast with Pierre last week, I think it was. Yeah. So there's no formal definition, I just kind of pulled it out of the air. So we have a physical immune system that fights off viruses. An intellectual immune system would be if there's any parasitic ideas or poisonous viral ideas, ideological infection that comes our way, we can actually fight it off, which is why the moral philosophy is so important. If you have a moral philosophy and you have a sense of right and wrong that you're actively engaged in developing on a daily basis, it's way more easy for you to have an intelligent filter for stuff that's coming in. But don't be fearful of stuff that's coming in. Because people know that their immune system is weak and their filters are weak, They get fearful and hysterical and angry with ideas and with words, which is really dumb. It's so stupid. And it's really not an adult way to respond. As strong, robust, rational adults, you should say, let it come in. I have an intellectual immune system, meaning if there's any ideas that come in that are not good for me or not good for the environment, they might linger like a flu for about 3 or 4 days whilst I consider they're okay, and then they'll get kicked out. But you have to actually work on that. It's not going to come naturally. You have to work on thinking. You have to become a good thinker. You have to become a critical thinker. You have to develop your intellectual faculties. You need to have these conversations. You need to have hard conversations about weird, awkward subjects again and again and again, so that you develop the muscles for that. And you go, okay, well, I used to think this, and now I think that, and oh, okay, I'd never considered that point of view before. You get flexible, you get strong. It's good for you. And when you practice the immune system and you let viruses in and then you kick them out again, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. You build up propaganda antibodies. It's good at making things up.
Yeah, that's good.
Nods of approval from the room. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, there's 10,000 people in this
Right.
studio at this moment, all wearing masks. I was wondering from Paul, if someone has to display all of the characteristics you mentioned to be a narcissistic abuser, or can they just display only a few of them?
Yeah, good question, Paul. Thank you. Don't get stuck on the word narcissism. If somebody displays just a few of these and you're talking about an interpersonal relationship, then we can say they are abusive. I would advise personally that you look for a consistency of action over time. Anybody can have a bad day. Anybody can be in just a twat of a mood and just not be fair with you or bully you or take it out on you. In many ways, you kind of, it almost defines the intimacy of a relationship, because most people wouldn't do that with like a bank manager or something, but they might do it with someone they're intimately close with. You need to study the effect of the Jungian shadow as it pertains to interpersonal relationships. If, however, there is a consistent pattern of anyone, I think I mentioned 9 or 11 maybe, different things they could do, and they're doing it again and again over time, especially if you ask them to stop, and they just don't, they just keep doing it, you got a problem. But don't worry about whether it's narcissism or not. We just say, this is emotionally abusive, I asked you to stop. I've asked you multiple times to stop. Multiple times you've shown that you haven't stopped. You're done. You don't need more of a rubber stamp from me than that to start looking for the exit on that relationship.
This one's from Natalie. You can walk away from narcissistic parents or relationships, but not from government. What do you do in this case?
Yeah, it's a real problem. Where do you go? There is no walking away, and this is why if you consider what I said about ambient abuse, it's one of the things that makes the ambient abuse so bad. There's nowhere to go. You'd have to literally leave your country of origin and go and live in the wilderness somewhere in order to walk away from it. And even then, the government of that country might come to your house and arrest you or whatever. So the more facile solutions are just not there for us. If you live in a modern Western liberal democracy and your parents, your friends or whoever is not nice to you, or you just have a difference of values, you have the freedom to travel to a different place and go there and work there, but you don't even have the freedom to travel at the moment. So yeah, it's really, really hard to walk away. So the answer is we can't. We have to, I'm going to use the verb fight this, but I mean non-violently. We need to resist this non-violently in the ways that I mentioned earlier, as loudly as we can and as consistently as we can.
So this might be the last one.
Okie dokie.
How do we cope with the riot police, or I guess government in general, becoming violent towards peaceful protesters?
I mean, I'm not Gandhi. I'm a fella off YouTube. I mean, I would leave if I saw riot police turn up. Sorry, I'm not trying to make history. If men in armour I've been gassed. Most of you watching this won't have been gassed. It's really unpleasant. I've been beaten up multiple times as an adult due to my profession. It's really not pleasant. So, you know, if we were in a situation now, literally we're at a protest and riot police showed up, I'd say, right, it's time to go home. There's nothing to be gained through, what are you doing at that point? Oh, just get them, let's go and hit them. With what? Like, what's that going to do? Were you trying to be famous? Or, I don't even know. So I would just leave. If a protest became so violent that they called in the riot police, I'd say that's it. It's done. I'm not the protest guy, folks. I'm not the riot guy. I don't believe in it. I've tried to be as clear as I can. They are so ready for you to protest and for that protest. They'll put their own people in the protest. They'll make sure it turns violent. Then they'll kettle you so that you all stand on top of each other and they won't let you leave, so that you piss yourself, you shit yourself, and they make you stand on top of each other this close and they won't let you leave. It's perfectly legal. It's a technique, I don't know where it was developed, but the British police do this. They kettle you, meaning they keep you in a kettled space. Everybody pisses on each other, everybody shits on each other, and they keep you there for hours until you're exhausted and you go home with wet trousers. I could do without it, mate, honestly. I'm not that guy. Never will be. We had anarchists in the UK in the turn of the century who were doing all kinds of crazy violent things and bombings and all that. Dead against it. Dead against it. I don't think it does anything. I think, if anything, you're reinforcing a system of control and you're justifying their hostility. Oh, well, look at what they did. There was a bombing, there was a stabbing, they stamped on a policeman's head, they did this, they did the other. If they come out again, smash them to bits. They're so ready. They're so ready for you. They want you to do it. They're ready to go. So don't feed into it. So yeah, if riot police showed up, you'd be like, where's Richard gone? He's in a taxi. He's at home apparently. He's watching this on Instagram from the couch. Not that guy, mate. Not that guy. Words are more powerful. Thoughts are more powerful. We can use our intellect, and I do believe we can shame them into changing these policies, or we shame them until they force their hands and admit that there's no more liberal democracy and that this is now a totalitarianist state, in which case it's a different conversation. And you won't be having it with me, you'll have to have it with somebody else, some paramilitary lunatic. Let's take one more question and then we shall wrap it.
Can I ask you a question?
This one's from Pierre XO.
So ever since the first situation happened, the very first lockdown, and seeing how things have evolved over the year, what shifts in your own perspective and your thoughts on the agenda, also in your own world, that you've seen with the consistent bouncing back and forth and the escalation of everything? Where are you at now as well?
Do you mean like emotionally?
Sure.
Emotionally, it's been very, very trying. It's been a fucking awful year for me personally, as I'm sure it has for everybody. And I'm pretty resilient and I'm pretty well equipped for this kind of thing. It's been extremely tough, personally. Just trying to see family has been horrendous. I've cycled through various levels outside of the emotional world. I've cycled through various levels of paranoia. And I do think that what we're facing is opportunism. There are clearly conspiracies. There is rank opportunism. There are conspiracies. There is corruption, and then there is just incompetence. And I think, like, in the last 2 months, there's also another thing that's come in. This actually started in America. I was in America seeing family in December. All legal. Follow the rules. Don't get mad at me. I started to think that this is just inevitable. There's like an inevitability to this. Even if it wasn't this, it would be something else. Because of the nature of power, the nature of governments, the fact that the human population is just exploding so rapidly. And I really think that people who are in positions of power, it's not us versus the top 0.1%. It's us versus the whole pyramid of control. And in a certain sense, it's not just people, it's power structures. I sound like an SJW now, don't I? But it is. It is. The enemy is power structures themselves. They're mindless, consciousless matrices of power. And because there's tectonic shifts from the bottom, as the ground swells and moves, everybody in the power tree panics, and the power tree itself panics, and it gets muscular. It's like, just push down. Like if you're a monkey up a tree and I shake the tree, you don't just go, no, well, I guess I'm not in the tree anymore. No, you grip and you, fuck you, I'm staying in my tree. I've got this power position. So there is conspiracies, there is corruption, there is opportunism, there's just human movement. And we've never had so many human beings on the planet as we do right now. In recorded history that we're aware of, unless Graham Hancock is right, we've never had the tech that we've got now. Maybe we had it 14,000 years ago and there was a big flood and it all went away. But as far as we know, the tech that we have is so power threatening. So we have these there's this perfect storm of like a huge population expansion, which means that if the population rose up into a full-scale V for Vendetta style revolt, the people who are in charge right now, there wouldn't be dust left. There'd be nothing left of them. It would be completely destroyed. So they're very paranoid. Plus the technology that we've been developing on the side really facilitates uprisings. It really facilitates violent revolution, which is why and I could see it. I could see that happening this year. And I want to be saying like, please don't do that. I know you're frustrated. I know you're mad. I know that like, in many ways, I hear I would even say you could be somewhat justified. And I don't say don't do it to protect the system. I say don't do it to protect you. It will make it worse. We have to, this is a war on consciousness. It's not a muscle war. Muscle wars are over. It's over. Like there's no, muscle wars are done. So we have to find a way to upgrade. So my paranoia, because I think there was a point where I was saying, oh, it's about changing the money. It is about moving us towards a cashless society, but that was there before anyway. It is about making us more traceable. That was there anyway. Vaccines, food control, water control, that was there anyway. There's a movement towards control. And I see more incompetence than I saw a year ago, a lot more just stupid corruption. And I just see a movement. It's like a tide. We're moving. There's a tidal force to this. And what do we think? Like the technology is growing at the rate that it's growing, the population's exploding the way that it's exploding. You think that like governments are just going to do nothing. You think they're not going to push back. You think that of course they're paranoid. Of course they want more control. It's self-serving.
So in a situation like this, especially with wealth redistribution, do you think there's in the meantime, not necessarily a solution, but a direction to go, especially if you're not one of those oligarchs or tech startup junkies?
Well, this is why I think like we need to this is a really critical time and we need to keep our eyes open and we have to do better. Humanity just has to do better. We're not going back. So if anybody's got that question in mind, it's over. Like we're not going backwards. That we won't go back to the world of before. Good. It wasn't great. People were just sleepy wage slaves and they just so we have the crisis is an opportunity for some kind of authentic awakening that really causes us to try to upgrade our consciousness, but we all have to do better. And there's no facile solution. There's no sexy solution here. It's all a pain in the arse. You've got to be a better human. You've got to develop a moral philosophy. You've got to become more disciplined. You can't, when I say unplug, I mean unplug from the medicine, unplug from the food, unplug from the propaganda, unplug from the lifestyle. We've got to do better. I think the split that can sometimes be drawn between the people at the bottom of the pyramid and the people in the pyramid right the way through to the top, we're all humans. We all have to do better from the bottom up. We can't just be like, oh, just let me watch TV every day. Let me just take my couple of holidays and I'll watch Neighbours and Coronation Street every day and I'll just drink at the weekends until I'm vomiting on the floor. It's like, what is that? That's shit. That's not life. That wasn't life. This sucks. Let's build better. Oh shit, I nearly said build back better. Whoa, I don't mean that. Let's do better. We could just do better as human beings, I think.
Do you think the current state of society is going to remain fragmented and divided, or do you see a line or a time where it actually is possible that things might unify?
Things will definitely unify. We are moving towards unification. These, the stupidity of identity politics and race-based politics and all this flesh suit obsession will die out. It's inevitable. The question is when. And we have a say in that as well. We have agency. If we do nothing, it will certainly die out, but it might take 5,000 years. And a lot of pain can happen in 5,000 years. Or we can just say, look, we can be assholes and we can let this carry on for hundreds of generations and keep being pricks to each other. Or we can just stop now and just save our children's children from all that shite. Just stop. But that's humanity's decision. Are you going to continue enjoying racism? Are you going to continue enjoying and consuming and indulging in race baiting? Are you going to continue indulging in deception and malice and poisoning of the well and trolling and being an arsehole? We've got to stop being arseholes. It's as simple as that. If we don't make that choice, like, I'm not going to indulge in that. Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm frustrated. Yes, I'm resentful. But I'm not going to act out in that way. We can do so much better. We have to resolve, in the Jungian sense, we have to resolve the shadow, at least a little bit. But it's us that has to do it. Like, it's down to us to not indulge in these dark pleasures. And they are dark pleasures. I really believe, I honestly believe racism, as one example of, you mentioned the divisions between people. I don't think that it's predominantly like a biological drive or like people say it's genetic, it's xenophobia. I think it's an indulgence. I think people do it because they like it. I think it's like eating chocolate cake or something. I know it's not good for me. I know it's going to make me fat, but yummy. They just fucking love it and they gorge on it.
Or like a type of moonshine.
Yeah.
It's the worst type of distilled liquor
Yeah.
they can't get away from.
It makes you blind in one eye.
Yeah.
It's
Violent,
makes
aggressive.
your feet fall off and you get violent and aggressive. Yeah, but it is like that. It is something that you imbibe that sort of temporarily empowers you. There is a power in racism. There is a sort of a narcissistic elation in pretending that we are fundamentally different and I'm fundamentally superior to you, no matter how shitty I am. Personally, racially, I'm superior. And the people who are claiming racial superiority are always the dorkiest, like most inbred looking.
Oh my God.
It's true though. You show me any racial supremacist, you're always like, oh yeah, come on, mate. Just really?
Yeah, that's the best you have to offer.
That's the best your race
something
offers.
up there.
Come on, dude. And it really is. I think that at the moment what's happening is because we're so boundaryless, we are listening to too many traumatized people. We're permitting trolls. You don't permit trolls. It's not. You're defending free speech when you remove trolls. They might not be narcissistic psychopaths, but their speech patterns, their behaviors are narcissistic psychopathy because it's not sincere communication, it's reaction-seeking communication, and it hurts free speech to indulge that kind of bad faith pseudo-argumentation, which it isn't even that. The race issue, it will be resolved, we will be unified, but there's no guarantee of when that happens, but we can choose for it to be now. Just say, fuck it, let's stop. Like, what are we doing? Like, why are we listening to the worst people? Why are we platforming the worst people? Just don't hurt them, don't deplatform them, don't cancel them. Stop tuning in. Why are we all addicted to hate? Why are we addicted to this weird righteous indignation and conflict and anger? It's because we've lost our humanity and we've lost each other. We've lost the connection with each other. I don't believe anybody can really authentically be racist who's traveled and lived with people from different backgrounds. I just don't think racism can survive in that kind of a lifestyle. It can only survive in isolation, in trauma, and in negative feedback loops.
So I predict that a conversation will happen in the next few months, and that is the effect of lockdowns and the current laws on the upcoming generation and children. And what are your thoughts on, first of all, what do you think are the effects, or from what you've read, on children and the younger generation? How will this affect them while they grow up? And if there's any action that they could take to improve, what would that be, in your opinion?
Well, the effect of this lockdown, not just for children, but children suffer it worse than the rest of us. It's for all of us. Oddly enough, it seems to have benefited certain people. How strange. We're all more dependent on mainstream media now than we were before. The news was losing ground. Now it's regained ground because people are tuning in every day to find out if the government through Fox News or the government through BBC News is telling us whether we get to have our freedoms back or not. And then when we tune in to hear, when do we get our freedoms back again, please, Daddy? We're then bombarded with propaganda, horror, adrenalizing nonsense, and a load of garbage. It plugs us back into our phones for the same reason. It's plugged us back into social media for the same reason. It's plugged us right back into the mainstream media. It's got us at home consuming Netflix. We buy things through Uber Eats and Amazon. Isn't that strange? It's really plugged us back into the matrix. This whole thing has just taken the global population, which had access to the matrix and was going there anyway, and just gone, get in there. And the kids will feel all of that worse than the rest of us. They've effectively been grounded for a year. They've been punished. They've been given the worst punishment most parents use, but with having done no wrong. They've been separated from each other. They could potentially grow up more schizoid. They could potentially grow up now not being able to relate to each other. They might opt out. They might be like, no, I don't want to hang around with people. They're weird. I want to be on my phone. If you want to talk to me, hit me up on Zoom. That's how we talk now. Or just message me. Don't call me. Let's not see each other. How do you counteract that? I don't want to be that guy, but like we really could do with leaning back into a more natural lifestyle. We really could do with communities getting back together, put the phones down, put the laptops down, turn the news off. Let's see each other face to face. I know it sounds weird, but it's an important part of human interaction. We need to see each other and smell each other because you're getting information you need to touch each other. That's just natural. That's how we've evolved. And the vision that I had when I was talking a lot about social media was like campfires. People should get around the campfire of a nighttime and just look at each other and talk to each other and see what happens. With no particular agenda. It's not like a weird religious or cult thing. Do you or you don't have to sign up to my weird cult. That's advertised next week. Just hang out and just, whether you're literally around a physical campfire or not, I don't really care, but that's what we're evolved for. We sit at night around the campfire and we digest what's happened. We tell each other stories. We tell each other the dreams we had. We tell each other what we saw on the hunt today and the things that's what we evolved for. We're not consumers. We're not these weird plastic narcissistic consumers. We're strange, powerful, animalistic, superstitious, mythical, archetypal hunter-gatherers. That's what we've been. We can't just like go, okay, evolution stop, now everybody jump into a pod. No wonder we're miserable. We've been miserable for years. This just made it worse. It just accelerated that podifying and matrixifying of humanity. So it pushes the children to get into the pods, the matrix of their own volition. So we really need to show them another way. And you can't just tell them. You can't just say, put your iPad down whilst you're taking pictures of them and posting it on fucking Facebook. You all got to do it. We all have to move in that direction. Children will do what you do. They won't do what you say. Have you got one last question? I can see it on your face.
So,
okay.
As of yesterday, this undisclosed location has written into law that it is illegal to go see your parents, friends, and family, which is new information for you. I forgot to tell you that detail.
Am I sat in the location where that's true?
Boyfriend and girlfriends included.
Really?
Yes.
You can't see anybody now?
No.
Oh, well,
So close your eyes as I'm talking to you. Wear the mask over your pupils, sir.
I can't see my friends, so they
As I
don't
am
exist.
asking you this question, I am staring at the wall.
So from Monday, this will be law in the location where we are right now, that you can't see friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, family, nobody.
Yes,
What are you allowed to do from Monday? Just lie on your back in the living room and...
do that thing.
Wow.
So what I have to say about that, and I think it's a good way to conclude it, would you agree that the most productive form to rebel and make your statement at this stage is to literally show up in person and have a conversation with someone?
As I say, like, you know, I'm not for any kind of violence, but yes, I do think that, because it would speak to what I said before about sort of pushing with reason and sanity and in good humor and in good taste to say, okay, what are you going to do? Like, are you actually going to arrest me for this? You're going to arrest me for seeing my mum. You're going to arrest me for seeing my friends. How many police do you have? Like, are you going to arrest all of us? Do you know how many people are in this city, in this country? How are you going to actually police that? And it will be very interesting to see if the police go along with it. The police are people too. They have kids, they have wives, they have husbands. They don't agree with everything the government's doing. Let's see if anybody actually gets arrested for that. I really don't see. Yes is the answer to your question. Would it be a good way of demonstrating how stupid that is? Wow, our major rebellion here would be to like meet up and hug each other. And let's see if they club us to death and gas us for that. Unlawful hugging.
That's quite romantic. That would be a lovely ending to a film.
And they all got clubbed to death for
hugging.
unlawful hugging. Wow. Yeah, what a time to be alive. What a
Well,
time to be alive.
thank you, Mr. Grannon, for all of your insight today.
No problem at all. Ladies and gents, thanks very much for tuning in. We're broadcasting live from Prague. This has been a production with that we're doing with Iconic over in the UK. Thank you to Thomas, the video editor, Pierre XO, and Polly, my timekeeper, for helping me out tonight. Thank you all for your time and for your attention. I hope I've really drilled home to you how important your time and your attention and your consciousness is. It's the most precious currency that you have. You can't get any refunds on it. Spend it wisely. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing, you can look for me on YouTube. I have various YouTube channels. My name is Richard Grannon, and you can find me on the Instagrams as well under the same name, bizarrely enough, Richard Grannon. So I think that's it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you all very soon. Cheers.